Welcome to the Turnaround Trader Tip Tuesday. We're going old school here with the crisscross, make you want to jump. All right, Trader Tip Tuesday, here we go. It's not only Trader Tip Tuesday, but it's also Turnaround Tuesday. Turnaround Tuesday is a famous phrase in the trading industry where the high or the low typically goes in on Tuesdays. But today we're going to talk about it in a different context. Today we're going to talk about it in turning our beliefs around. So we're going to get into some highly charged stuff here today. Some of you are going to get annoyed and upset. And if you get upset, that's telling you something. So to be successful as a trader, it is important to examine our beliefs to see if our beliefs are useful or not. This is one of the greatest things I got from Dr. Tharp. We want to examine our beliefs and not judge them as good or bad, but actually look at them to see if they're useful or not. And one of our core objectives to be happy, to be successful as a trader, to have joy in our life is to get rid of beliefs that are not useful, to get rid of beliefs that are limiting, and replace them with beliefs that are useful. One interesting thing is the beliefs that we are most likely to defend, most likely to argue, and most likely to refuse to hear opposing views are the beliefs that actually require the most examination. When we have strong emotional charges to a belief, there's usually an underlying fear related to that belief. We're protecting ourselves in some way. Going through belief examination helps us to determine why we have fear and to determine whether that fear is warranted or not. So an exercise I encourage you to do is to take a belief that you hold a strong emotional charge to and see if you can make the opposing argument. See if you can separate yourself, even if it's just for a moment. If you could separate yourself and you could look at it the other way, if you had to argue for the other side, what would you argue that would make sense to you? What would you debate that would make sense to you? So I'm going to give you an example for me personally. I live in Chicago, and I saw Chicago when I first moved to Chicago in 1987. Chicago is an incredibly violent and dirty city. High murder rate, high pollution, high trash everywhere, panhandlers everywhere. It was just gross. But over the next 20 years, the city dramatically changed. The city became safer. The city became cleaner. We went from a murder rate of about 900 to 1,000 murders a year when I first moved to Chicago to where we got down to a murder rate down in the low 200s. And the city transformed. The city became beautiful. Downtown completely changed. Lincoln Park completely changed. The west side completely changed. The south side completely changed. So many areas of the city changed for the better. Now, what's happened in the last 5-6 years is the city has really started to deteriorate. And crime is massively increased. And this bothers me. It bothers me to see a city I love so much start to become so violent and dirty. And so one of the things that I've noticed is that the city is really going soft on criminals. So why is that? This is not just in Chicago. This is all around the United States. But in Chicago specifically, why is this happening? So this is a good example. I had a strong belief. 2020 was a really hard year for me in terms of my beliefs, because a number of things that I always thought were going to happen, that I told people were going to happen, and they're like, you're crazy. It's never going to happen. They happened. What am I referring to? 2 massive riots. The riots in Chicago were actually much worse than reported in the media. There was a riot on Memorial Day of 2020 and another one in August. The one on Memorial Day of 2020 was really bad. That weekend, massive amounts of the city were destroyed, billions of dollars of damage. You go through up and down Michigan Avenue, up and down Oak Street, Walton, the Loop. You're talking about every window smashed, all the stores looted. Well, this brought up a lot of emotional charge for me. And then not only did all this happen, but nobody suffered any consequences for it. Everybody stole all kinds of stuff and nothing happened. Okay, I have strong charge about this. So I step back and I look at it and I go and say, okay, what would be the argument I could make? And if I'm going to make this argument, let me do at least a little bit of research to try and understand. Why would our city take criminals and just release them? Makes no sense to me. Well, when I started looking at it, some very interesting points came up. Okay, so a lot of people really don't like the DA, Kim Foxx, for the reasons I just mentioned. But what's fascinating is Chicago jails are massively overcrowded. And I've gone down on some Christian missionary work into Cook County, the Cook County prison, which is really like, it's not a Cook County jail. It's like a prison. It is a jail, but it's massive. And so Cook County's overflowing. So one of the things that's happening is that if somebody gets charged with a crime, it's quite possible that if they can't post bail, they'll sit in Cook County for over a year before they ever even go to trial. So what that means is there's potentially a lot of people who are innocent that are in jail. It's essentially like a prison sentence. Some of them, if they were found guilty, would get 1 or 2 years in prison or probation. But instead, they're sitting in jail for a year, even longer. So they're getting a sentence, even though they're innocent. So this is why a lot of people who commit crimes are being released. Now, certain aspects of my beliefs did not change as a result of this. I still believe that people need to be held accountable. I still believe there needs to be discipline and rules. But it gave me some compassion to look at the issue, and not only have compassion around the issue, but actually, could you actually think of a better solution rather than lock them up, let them go, lock them up, let them go? There's got to be a middle ground. So one of the things we see in society today is sides are becoming more and more polarized and more hateful of one another. It's very easy to get into this. So when we examine beliefs, we actually are able to look at the other side, and by doing so, we actually can start to come to a common ground. This exercise gives different perspectives, different understanding, and oftentimes compassion. Now, let me show you. Here's a chart. You can look at this chart. You take a minute. Many of you are technicians. Look at this chart and tell me what you think. What do you see? So let me show you another view of this chart. And look at this chart. This is actually the same chart, just flipped. The first version, the chart's upside down. The second version, it's correct. This chart is of the Australian dollar with weekly bars. Now, what's interesting is we could have a very different perspective just by turning the chart upside down. There's a lot of traders over the years. One of the first technical classes I took was at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and there was a trader, a technician, who came in and taught about technical analysis. And he talked about sometimes what he'd do is he'd just take the chart, he'd throw it across the room on the floor, and he'd look at it. And he would walk around in a circle around the chart and look at it and see to give him a different view of what's going on, different perspective. So this is actually useful in trading. And let me share some examples. So one of the teachers I learned from and studied under was a trader named Charles Drummond. And Drummond was brilliant. One of the things that Drummond used to do is he would teach his students, and then whatever trade the student wanted to make, let's say that you wanted to buy the Australian dollar. Charles would say, you want to buy it? Okay, I'll sell it to you. I'll take the other side. So here you've done all this work to research a pattern. You have confidence and conviction of your pattern, and you're going to step out and buy it. And Drummond said, okay, I'll take the other side. Now, for Drummond to do this, one, he didn't have attachments. We as traders tend to have attachments to our trades, which is not a good thing. We need to be able to step back and see our trades for what they are. So Drummond was masterful at not being attached. And then the second thing he had was outstanding monitoring skills. So if he went short, then he would monitor what he was seeing, and he might flip and get long pretty quickly. But he would start short, he would monitor, and then he would use his monitoring skills to flip the position. No attachments and superior monitoring skills. So I thought this was really interesting. And Drummond did a lot of putting himself in different environments and making himself take different trades. So he went through a phase where he was a big trend follower, and then he went through a phase where he's a big trend fader, and he went through a phase where he was a congestion trader. And he learned so much by trading these different styles. I have gone through the exact same thing myself. I've pushed myself to trade in every environment and make myself think about, how do I trade in this environment? Now, this leads me to the next point. So for you, when you have patterns that you trade or systems that you trade, one of the things that I encourage you to do, a phenomenal exercise, is take your best patterns, take your best systems, and run a study in which every time the setup occurs, fade your setup and go the other way. Just test it and see what happens. I did this with one of my best patterns. And what was so interesting was, out of my research came an amazing pattern that does the opposite, that fades my best pattern. Now, there's subtleties in them. They're not purely opposite, but the subtleties make the difference between when the trend following trade works and when the trend fading trade works. So by doing this research, a couple of things happened. I came up with a fantastic pattern. I have students who trade this fade pattern as their bread and butter pattern. They love it. You're selling high when everybody wants to get long. You're buying low when everybody wants to get short. And the market reverts and the trade works really well. So I have students who love this pattern. So I discovered that pattern and have made money trading that pattern. But the other thing it did is it made my best pattern better. Because I understood my best pattern now in a nuanced way that I did not understand before, that made it even better. So I got two patterns out of it, and my original pattern was even better. This could only happen because I was willing to do the opposite, to step back from my beliefs and re-examine them. So I encourage you to go through this exercise. You will be surprised at what you learn. You might find an unbelievable pattern out of just doing the opposite of something you've done for a long time. So one of my partners that we do research on, one of the things he added was we do a test for every time we make a trade. If we did the opposite and it shows a strong move in the opposite direction, we tag that and we go study it. And oftentimes what we find is that the trades that we think might be the best going one direction, let's say we're going long in a trend, end up being phenomenal trades on the trend fade in the other direction. And this work does that. So I encourage you, one, to step back and examine your beliefs. The beliefs that you are the most fired up about, the beliefs you defend the most, go into them. What is causing your fear? If you're not scared, if you're not fearful, you're not threatened. One of my favorite analogies is that if a 2-year-old comes up and says, I'm going to kick your ass, I'm so angry with you, you're in big trouble. Oh my gosh, you look at the 2-year-old and you laugh your ass off. Why? Because the 2-year-old is no threat to you. It's cute. You put it on a video, you post it on Facebook. It ends up on America's Funniest Home Videos. Here's this 2-year-old screaming he's going to kick your ass. And it's, ha, ha, ha. That is so funny. But if somebody walks up to you, 6'7" and 260 pounds, and a black belt in multiple martial arts, you're going to feel differently. Because it's about fear. So get clear about what is causing your fear. Can you change what's causing your fear? Can you adopt a set of beliefs in which you don't live by fear, you live by love and abundance? Going through this exercise can be transformational for you. Then take the same idea, take it into your trading, take it into your patterns and your systems, and check them. Do it with your entries, do it with your exits. See if by flipping your view, that if you can come up with a better result. You will be absolutely surprised at what happens when you go through this. So that's our tip for Trader Tip Tuesday, Turnaround Tuesday. And I'll see you next week. Have a great week.